The title of this video is a bit misleading. I'm not exactly depressed, I think. I'm more disenchanted or disillusioned, unhedonic to some extent, unable to experience pleasure, and a bit listless and inertial, depleted, exhausted, no energy. None of these things, put together even, amount to depression. Depression is a clinical condition. But I use the word depressed in the title as a kind of shorthand to describe my state of mind. I think my problem is that looking back at my life, I'm 65 years old almost, looking back at my life, I realize that it has been an uninterrupted string of failures and defeats, most of them self-inflicted. I'm beginning therefore to accept, however painfully, that I'm not self-efficacious. What is self-efficacy? Let's have a look at the dictionary of the American Psychological Association. Self-efficacy is an individual's subjective perception of their capability to perform in a given setting or to attain desired results. It was proposed by Albert Bandura as a primary determinant of emotional and motivational states and behavioral change. It's also called, by the way, perceived self-efficacy. I think there's a problem with this definition and with Bandura's approach to self-efficacy. I think self-efficacy is, to a large extent, subjective, but I think it can be determined from the outside. I think the environment matters. I think context is crucial. Self-efficacy can be impacted by an environment in change, by a transformation or a transforming set of circumstances. Self-efficacy is influenced by external factors as much as by internal factors. Constant failure in all spheres of life sometimes is the outcome of rapidly changing circumstances, environments, mores, conventions, norms, behavioral patterns, and cataclysmic changes in gender relations, in immigration, in war and peace, and so on and so forth. I think, in short, Bandura was a bit short-sighted. I think self-efficacy is determined both internally and externally. And these external changes, these external fluctuations, this external volatility, these vicissitudes, they cause depression, anxiety, addictions, and substance use. Look, for example, at the past 5 years, since the pandemic. I think the pandemic has accelerated a general trend of loss of self-efficacy. People perceive themselves as more and more helpless and hopeless, and they react with aggression. The consumption of horror movies has quadrupled because people perceive reality as a kind of horror movie. They wish to learn about their circumstances by observing horror flicks. And so I think self-efficacy diminishes when the environment is uncertain, unstable, unpredictable, indeterminate, or when the environment is such that it presents challenges to one's values, beliefs, upbringing, and behavioral patterns which are inculcated. And so when an individual finds himself or herself in a country, in a state, in a society, in a culture, in a collective, as a member of a group, or having to interact with the above, and they contradict or they undermine the individual's perception of reality. In other words, there's a form of collective gaslighting. the individual reacts with diminished self-efficacy. So self-efficacy, the concept of self-efficacy must be expanded dramatically. And coming back to myself, of course, the reason I perceive myself as failure and loser, the reason I exercise autoplastic defenses, the reason I blame myself, the reason I feel ashamed and guilty for whatever has transpired in my life, is because of Bandura's definition of self-efficacy, which emphasizes a totally subjective experience. It's as if my ability to extract favorable outcomes from my environment, from people around me, from changing circumstances, my ability totally depends on me. I'm 100% responsible for my choices and decisions and the outcomes and consequences of these choices and decisions. And while this is largely true, there are many things out there which are not under our control. Our lives are increasingly determined and channeled and shaped by forces which are gigantic and impersonal and even random. Forces which can easily be perceived as malevolent, even though they're not. And so the environmental contribution, the environmental component in self-efficacy has grown exponentially over the past few years. And if I want to maintain or to create an account of my failures and defeats and mishaps and bad decisions and wrong choices and misbehavior, if I want to create a proper scientific, so to speak, objective view of my conduct or misconduct, I think it would have to do to some extent with the way the world has changed on me. As I said, I'm 65. I was born and I grew up in another world, literally another planet. The way the world is today is perceived by my generation as dystopia. We, or at least I, find it very difficult to adapt and very difficult to act and definitely very difficult to secure the outcomes that are conducive to self-growth and self-development and happiness. I think stranded time travelers and extraterrestrials are likely to develop reactive, incapacitating mental illness when they land on Earth or in another period of history. I think if in the future there would be time travel and there would be a glitch in the machine and people would get stuck in another period of history, they would feel depressed. They would be highly inefficacious. They wouldn't know what to do. They would make all the wrong choices and decisions. They would secure negative outcomes. And they would gradually descend into a maelstrom of depression and anxiety and self-recrimination and self-hatred and self-loathing and self-rejection and self-destruction and self-trashing and self-harm. This is stranded time travelers. Similarly, I think if extraterrestrials were to land on Earth and then get stranded because their spaceship went haywire or whatever, I think these aliens would react identically if they have a psyche similar to humans. They would definitely, in any case, be a lot less self-efficacious than on their home planet. And the thing is that the world has changed, or reality has changed to such an extent that people my age do feel as if we were time travelers, as if we were aliens, as if we were extraterrestrials. We do feel that alienated, that estranged. The world does feel so bizarre, so outlandish, so inane, and very often so insane to us, that of course we are not quite sure what are the proper codes of conduct, what scripts to follow, how to work with people, even how to manipulate people. how to secure the outcomes that that we need. In short, we don't have access to this reality. My age group, my peer group, we don't have access to this reality. It's gone too far. The changes have been too extreme and too accelerated. The alacrity with which reality has transformed feels surrealistic. It's as if we are stuck in some dreamscape or some nightmare. You see, I'm a throwback. I'm a throwback to rationalism, an 18th century enlightenment. I believe in the scientific method, in facts, in evidence, and in the procedures in place to obtain these facts and evidence and to verify, to ascertain their veracity, often by falsifying. And so this is the way I look at the world. This is the way I subsist and survive. This is the way I think. And this, to a large extent, is the way I emote on the rare occasion that I emote. There's no denying that I'm mentally ill, that I'm a narcissist and a psychopath. That's not what I'm saying. Of course I am. But this has more to do with interpersonal relationships and the ability to function in society. I'm talking about something completely different. I'm talking about the apparatus, the machinery that I have at my disposal to make sense of the world and of reality. I'm talking about doxastic and axiological elements, values and beliefs that emanate from the method that I've chosen to decipher the universe, to imbue it with meaning and direction and purpose. I'm therefore not talking about my interactions with other people. I'm talking about my interactions with the world, my interactions with reality, my interactions with the universe. And these interactions are structured using rationality, using the scientific method, using facts and evidence as organizing principles. And this is who I am, in essence, the quintessence of the 18th century intellectual. And everything in today's world conspires against this. Everything in today's world makes me feel a stranger in a strange land. Everything in today's world is against rationality, against science, against logic, against procedure, against rules. Everything in today's world is haphazard and pretty chaotic and founded essentially on aggression and on grandiosity. So I'm having serious difficulty to adapt to this new world. Not so brave, but new. I'm having difficulties. I experience maladaptations. I come up with dysfunctional solutions because I don't know the ropes. And it feels out of my comfort zone, alien territory, a planet far away at the very end of the galaxy. I don't know where I am. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who I'm talking to. And obviously, this has a massive impact on my self-efficacy, and I keep failing all the time. Let it be clear, I am not implying that I'm not responsible for my failures and defeats. That is not what I'm saying. On the very contrary, I've spent a lifetime castigating and chastising and blaming myself, self-recrimination. I pointed a finger at myself long before narcissism was a word. I was the first narcissist to out himself in the mid-1990s. And so I do take responsibility. I am guilty for many of the things that have happened to me and are happening to me. I have made, knowingly and unknowingly, the wrong decisions and adopted the wrong choices. I'm not disclaiming this. I'm not claiming otherwise. I'm not shifting the blame to the world. This is not an essay on alloplastic defenses. But I do say, what I am saying is that my mental illness, my dysfunction, my malaise, my pathological structures, mental structures, psychological structures, were still premised on some understanding of the world. They came into play in a reality which I thought I understood perfectly. And then the ground shifted, fell from under me and from under my generation. And suddenly we woke up into a reality which was unrecognizable, unsettling, upsetting, dangerous, terrifying. And this estrangement or this alienation reduced our self-efficacy or my self-efficacy further. What are these changes that I cannot cope with? What are these changes that discombobulated me? What are these changes that rendered me inefficacious, paralyzed, debilitated, incapacitated? What are these changes in reality and in the world and in society and in culture, contemporary culture, and in this period in history? What are the transformations that have rendered me essentially an invalid, someone who is unable to operate in and on his environment, to act in a way which would lead to favorable desired outcomes, or avoid at least adverse consequences? What in the world has caused me essentially to freeze? I think there are several developments which I truly cannot cope with, and which have reduced my self-efficacy to the point of self-sabotage, self-undermining, and ultimately self-destructiveness. The first one is the collapse in intelligence. There is objectively a decline in average population cohort-wide IQ. That's a fact. IQ is declining precipitously, by the way. The capacity for analytical thinking has almost vanished. Critical thinking is nowhere to be found. It is a takeover by the dumb and the stupid. And modern technologies are sterile. They are developed by the mentally ill for the consumption of the stupid. The mentally ill are empowering the stupid because the stupid support the fantasies and the bank accounts of the mentally ill. This is the collusion of the modern world, of contemporary civilization. The mentally ill and the stupid have taken over. The rational, the intelligent, the educated, they are considered to be the enemy. They are reminders of the masses' stupidity and the insanity of tycoons and billionaires and and everyone who is associated with modern technologies. And so they're the enemy. They're the enemy, and there is a backlash against 18th century enlightenment rationalists, such as myself, against scientists, such as myself, I'm a physicist, and against intellectuals, such as myself. We are being hounded and hunted down like so many beasts of prey. The second development is what I call malignant egalitarianism. It's a rejection, a vehement rejection, a proud rejection of knowledge as distinct from information. Raw information is a commodity nowadays, but raw information is not the same as knowledge. It's non-structured, it's chaotic. So there's a rejection of knowledge. There is a hatred of education. There is a disdain for expertise. Experts, scientists, intellectuals, professors, they are considered to be scum. They are suspected of corruption of the mind or of the pocket. They are fired, hounded, cancelled, hated on. It's a very bad time to be me. And it's a very bad time to espouse rationality and logic and to fight back against prejudice and bias and superstition and delusion and fantasy. It's a very bad time because anecdote and opinion rule the day rather than the scientific method and facts. There's a rise of pseudosciences, of the so-called occult, of the esoteric, of conspiracies, of religion, which is a form of mass delusion, and of fantasy. There's a counterfactual revolution. There is a rejection of evidence. There's a hatred of the propagators of all these. Science is decried, expertise is molested, authority is trampled on. It's a second cultural revolution. China was the first. And all this is coupled with another trend which undermines and hinders self-efficacy in people like me. Nihilism, negative affectivity, a celebration of hatred and envy and rage and grievances and aggression. The legitimization and normalization of the criminal, the unethical, the immoral. Take a small example. My work has been plagiarized by hundreds of people, shamelessly. And that's only one example, not even the most egregious by far. So it's difficult to act in an environment where the rules are gone, norms are dead. These are known as anomic societies or anomic environments. And environments where the only mores are the mores of self-advancement, self-aggrandizement, and definitely entitlement at the expense of others. Ironically, I am not thriving. I keep failing and I keep being defeated because everyone became a narcissist. And so it's very difficult for me to survive and to flourish, not because I'm a narcissist, but because I'm a narcissist committed to intellectual non-narcissism. I am an elitist in the sense that I recognize the supremacy of knowledge and education, but I'm intellectually very humble. I learn from everyone, everywhere, all the time. I accept that my constant state is a state of ignorance, that I don't know what I don't know, and that there's a lot that I know that is wrong. And so I'm intellectually humble in a society which is intellectually arrogant and haughty, intellectually delusional, intellectually absent, actually. And that is very difficult on me. My tribe, let's call them 18th century rationalists. My tribe is wandering the planet, bewildered, frightened, lost. My tribe is not self-efficacious. We are all failures. We are all losers. We are all defeated because we haven't adapted to these new realities. When you're confronted with the dumb and with the stupid, there are three ways to cope with them. You become as dumb and stupid as they are. That pleases them no end, and they elect you to office or they reward you financially. That's one strategy which someone like me can never adopt. And this kind of strategy, dumbing down, is a huge sacrifice in many ways. It's an inversion of the value system. It's like saying making money and becoming famous and getting elected to office matters to me more than who I am. I'm willing to deny myself in order to become all these things, in order to attain all these things. And I think that's a price that's too high to pay. And very few of my type of people are willing to pay this price. They instead withdraw, they avoid, they shut off, they become schizoid. And of course, they react with depression and anxiety because they're isolated. Of course, they abuse substances. Of course, they try to escape one way or another. My escape is books and movies, but there are people whose escape is drugs or alcohol. And of course, this has an impact on one's private life. Of course, marriages are destroyed. Of course, relationships are ruined. Of course, social isolation is rampant. It has a price. What could you do with the dumb and the stupid when they're in charge, when they're shaping the world? In the past, in my past, I could have easily avoided them. They cannot be avoided anymore. They're everywhere. They're all pervasive. They're all permeated. It's an invasion. These are the barbarians. They're not at the gate. They're way beyond the gates. They're empowered by technologies like social media and artificial intelligence, which is another form of crowdsourcing, and Wikipedia and so on. And there's no avoiding them. They shape the environment within which you have to operate. The condition is that you sacrifice your identity and your values and your beliefs and the way you see the world and the scientific method and rationality and logic. And then you're welcome to the club of the inane, the club of the effete, the club of the stupid, the club of the dumb. And this is, of course, one solution when you're confronted with the hordes and herds of the great unwashed. Yes, that's the way I see them. And that's the second solution when you're confronted with these people. Hold them in disdain, hold them in contempt. Communicate it to them so that they back off and stay away. The thing is that when you communicate your contempt and disdain, as I am doing habitually, this triggers a backlash. It infuriates the masses. It infuriates the stupid. The dumb can't tolerate it. And so they become vengeful. There's payback and backlash. They try to make you pay for not respecting them, for holding them in the contempt and disdain that they deserve. And that's therefore a solution that requires the sacrifice of self-efficacy, because you're likely to pay a heavy price for exposing the stupidity of others, for labeling them for who they are, dumb, incapable of thinking, and for exposing all kinds of pseudosciences and idiotic beliefs, such as astrology or homeopathy or to be frank, religion, the supreme beings and angels and other such idiotic infantile nonsense, or the paranormal, so-called. So there's a price to pay for that, a high price, because they are more numerous and they control the levers of power. And they defund universities, and they punish and chase away intellectuals. There's a huge migration of intellectuals nowadays, roaming the globe, trying to find a foothold. Which is nowhere to be had. My predicament is not unique. It's not individual. I know that I'm just one of tens of millions, possibly hundreds of millions. We can't find a place in this reality and in this world. It's very reminiscent of the 1930s. The 1930s, where numerous intellectuals committed suicide or were killed, assassinated in concentration camps, or lost their jobs at a minimum, the lucky ones. And this is the world we live in. And when an 18th century rationalist such as myself realizes that these are the second dark ages. It's the medievalism of the 21st century, and that this is not going to go away for probably 100 years, if not longer. This is the world for future generations. When we realized it, when we realized that everything we held dear, everything we've invested in, everything we've committed ourselves to, that includes science and education and learning and erudition and the scientific method and critical thinking and analytical thinking, and so when we realize that all this is dead and gone and buried, there's nothing much left to live for, honestly. And there is even the question of, why should I be self-efficacious? Why should I attempt to try to be successful, to accomplish things? For what? For whom? For, I mean, it's not only a question of who would value it, but like, it appears to be very solipsistic. The pursuit of education, other accomplishments, they appear to be solipsistic. They appear to be delusional, self-deceiving, because the world is not built like that anymore. What to an intellectual like me is an accomplishment, to the vast majority of humanity is risible and considered to be even contemptible. Academic degrees nowadays are contemptible. People hate on intellectuals publicly. People hate on people with academic degrees openly. And so everything we valued, everything we worked for, everything that structured our lives and gave them meaning, all of these things have gone down in the world to the point of vanishing and left us with an enormous lacuna, enormous vacuum, which we find increasingly more impossible to fill in. And so the incidence of depression and anxiety among the learned and the educated and the professionals and the experts and the authorities, professional authorities, and the incidence and prevalence of a depression and anxiety and substance abuse among these people is much higher than in the general population. General population is triumphant, is victorious. The stupid have won. The dumb have created their idiocracy. It is we who are not stupid, are not dumb, are educated. We who are paying the price. And of course, we have been miseducated or misindoctrinated to believe that it's all our fault. Well, to a large extent it is. One contributes to one's fate and destiny. But there is a contribution by the dystopian, horrible world that we have created. That the world has changed so much for the worse, as far as I'm concerned, makes it very difficult for me to accomplish things, to try, to work, and to be enthusiastic and energetic about what I do. Very difficult for me, because I don't think there's anyone left, in effect. I think humanity has already committed a collective intellectual suicide. The body will follow. It's a question of time. The mind is already gone.